My name is Susan Dalton, and I'm 33 years old. I work as a freelance web designer, and I've always been good with money. I used to live in Brookhaven with my husband, Eric, and his parents, Harold and Marjorie. From the outside, we looked like a happy family, but the truth was very different. Eric's parents were controlling and always had something negative to say about me. I tried to be patient, hoping they would accept me one day, but I was wrong. I was the one paying all the bills, rent, electricity, groceries, everything. Eric had a job, but he gave most of his money to his parents. I never complained, I just wanted peace. Then, one day, they asked me to give them my parents' house, the one I inherited when my mom and dad passed away. That house meant everything to me. When I refused, they called me selfish and told Eric to divorce me. The worst part? Eric didn't say a word, he just stood there. That's when I realized I was done being treated this way. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I just thought about all the times I paid for everything, hoping they would appreciate me, but they never did. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. When Marjorie asked if I was ready to sign over my house, I didn't answer. I just placed her plate on the table and walked away. Later that day, I turned off every payment: electricity, gas, water, internet, groceries. I knew how long it would take for them to notice. 3 days. On the 4th day, Marjorie snapped at me, "There's no food in the fridge." I smiled. Oh, I stopped paying for it. Didn't seem like I was needed here anymore. That evening, Eric came home to his parents panicking. No food, no hot water, and now no internet. They were furious. "I'll be leaving tomorrow," I said calmly. That night, I packed only what I needed: some clothes, my laptop, important papers, and a few pictures of my parents. I didn't want anything else from that house. The next morning, Eric looked at me. "You're really leaving?" "Yes," I said. "You're overreacting," he muttered. I let out a small laugh. "Your parents told you to divorce me over a house, and you didn't defend me. I was the one holding this place together, and now that I've stopped, look how fast everything fell apart." He had nothing to say. I walked downstairs. Marjorie glared at me, but I just looked her in the eye. Good luck keeping the lights on. Then, I walked out the door. As soon as I reached my car, my hand started shaking, not from fear, but from relief. I was finally free. And I knew this was just the beginning of something better. I drove straight to my parents' house, my house now. The moment I stepped inside, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The walls still carried a hint of my mom's favorite lavender candle, and sunlight filled the living room just as it did when I was a child. For the first time in years, I felt safe. I sat on the old couch, took a deep breath, and let everything sink in. I had left behind a broken home, an unhappy marriage, and people who only saw me as a source of money. Yet, instead of feeling empty, I felt strong. The silence after I left was louder than any words Eric or his parents ever spoke. There were no calls, texts, or apologies. I wasn't surprised. Deep down, they probably thought I'd come back when things got tough, but I had no plans of returning. I had given them all my time, money, and love, and now it was time to give that back to myself. 3 days after I moved back, I got my first call from Marjorie. "We need to talk," she said, without even greeting me. "I don't think we do," I replied calmly. She sighed. "We're struggling. The electricity is off, the fridge is empty, and your husband, ex-husband," I corrected her. There was a long pause. "Susan, don't be dramatic," she continued. I almost laughed. "You wanted me gone. Now you have what you wanted. You need to take care of your household. You're being cold." "No," I said softly. "I'm finished." Then I hung up. A few hours later, Eric sent a short, pathetic message. "Can we talk? I miss you." I stared at it for a few seconds, then turned off my phone. This was my time now, to heal and grow, and they were no longer part of that journey. The next morning, I went back to my work routine: coffee, laptop, soft music, and a list of clients waiting for updates on their websites. It felt good, peaceful, and productive. My mind was clear now that I wasn't constantly on edge in that toxic house. That afternoon, I received an email from one of my oldest clients. She was expanding her business and wanted to sign a long-term contract with me, paying double what I used to earn. I smiled as I signed the contract digitally and sent it. Life was moving forward faster than I had expected. Meanwhile, Eric and his parents soon learned how much they had depended on me. Instead of me having to check in, they started reaching out to me. A neighbor I used to chat with called. "Susan, I'm sorry to be nosy, but your in-laws have been arguing on the porch every night. I even saw a notice on the door this morning saying they're months behind on bills. I thanked her and hung up. I wasn't happy to see them struggle, but I wasn't sorry either. They had built this storm with their own actions. Then something unexpected happened. A letter from my parents' lawyer arrived. It explained that there was a clause in their will I had forgotten about. The clause stated that the house wasn't just mine, it was protected. If I ever married someone who tried to take it, the house would legally go to a family trust, keeping it only for blood relatives. That meant Marjorie and Harold's plan to bully me out of it would never have worked, even if I had signed it over. My parents had planned for this manipulation, and now I held proof in my hands. I felt a warm glow inside. Even though my parents were gone, they were still protecting me. Later that week, I updated the trust to make sure I was the only one allowed to manage the house. Then I filed for divorce. Surprisingly, filing for divorce wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, emotionally. Filing for divorce wasn't hard emotionally, but the paperwork was frustrating. Still, walking into my lawyer's office and saying, "I want out," felt like dropping a heavy burden I had carried for too long. My lawyer, Lingy, was sharp and spoke quickly. She didn't waste time. I liked that about her. As she looked through my documents, bank statements, receipts, and the letter from my parents' lawyer, her eyes lit up. "You've got something strong here," she said. "You didn't just pay for everything, they depended on you financially. This isn't just a divorce. We can file for financial abuse." I blinked. "That's a real thing?" "Oh, absolutely," she said. "And with these records, we'll make sure he pays for what he did to you." Within a week, Lingy filed for divorce and also a lawsuit against Eric and his parents for financial exploitation. It turned out Marjorie had been using my credit card for months, shopping, spa visits, even her medicine. That was another legal issue, using someone's money without permission. Then came the best part. Lingy got bank and utility records and officially sent them to Eric. That same day, a neighbor called me, sounding surprised. "A process server just showed up at their house," she said. "Your mother-in-law looked like she swallowed a lemon." I laughed, but I wasn't done. I sent all the unpaid bills still in my name to Lingy. They thought I'd just walk away? No, this wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. The court date arrived, and I walked in with my head high, wearing a navy blue suit. Eric sat across from me, looking exhausted. His parents sat behind him, whispering like they still thought this was just a misunderstanding, but it wasn't. Lingy was calm and confident. "They'll try to get sympathy," she whispered. "Stay strong, we have the truth on our side." The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Lingy showed all the bills I had paid, rent, groceries, utilities. Then she showed the credit card charges Marjorie had made without permission. Every receipt, every transaction, all the proof was there. Eric's lawyer tried to say I had willingly supported them. Lingy shut that down fast. Support is one thing, being used is another. Then came the moment that shocked everyone. Our former neighbor, Mrs. Daniels, took the stand. She cleared her throat and said, "Marjorie used to brag to me that Susan was easy to manipulate. She said they'd take the house once Eric convinced her it was his right as a husband." The room went silent. Eric's face turned red. Marjorie looked like she might faint. Then it was my turn to speak. I kept it simple. I didn't leave my marriage because I was selfish. I left because I realized I was being used. I paid for everything, supported everyone, and in return, I was disrespected and manipulated. That's not love, that's abuse. The judge nodded. "Well said, Miss Dalton." She looked through the documents, then finally spoke. "The evidence shows clear financial dependence, emotional manipulation, and unauthorized use of funds. The plaintiff, Susan Dalton, is granted full divorce settlement, protection of her family property, and $775,000 in financial restitution to be paid by the defendant, Eric Dalton." Marjorie gasped. Harold looked like he couldn't breathe, but it wasn't over. The judge turned to Marjorie. "As for the unauthorized credit card use, this court is forwarding those charges to the district attorney. Fraud charges may apply." Lingy leaned in. "She could be criminally charged," she whispered. Eric stood up, looking desperate. "Susan, please, we can fix this." I met his eyes. "I gave you everything, and when your parents made you choose, you chose them. There's nothing left to fix." Then I walked out of that courtroom, free. I turned my parents' house into something beautiful, not just for me, but for others. I started a small business hub for women who had been through financial abuse. I helped them build resumes, websites, and careers. My story went viral on a podcast. Women from all over reached out, thanking me for speaking up. Every evening, I lit a lavender candle in my parents' old living room, whispered a quiet thank you, and smiled. I didn't need revenge. I had peace. I had freedom.